This is Thumbing Through the Archives, a weekly radio show and podcast focusing on Michigan history, airing every Wednesday night from 5:30 to 7 p.m. on WMIC 660 AM and 95.3 FM. Also streaming in podcast form at our website, senlacbroadcasting.com. Now your hosts Mike Gallagher, Nick Lean, and Erica Frisbee.
Okay, and we are back finally with an episode of Thumbing Through the Archives, a podcast exploring the oddities, curiosities, and crimes in Michigan's histories. I'm Erica Frisbee. I am the news director here at Sound Like Broadcasting, and with me, per usual,
I'm Nick Lean. I'm the assistant manager at Sound Like Broadcasting.
And I'm Mike Gallagher, the sports editor of the Clair County News.
And if we all sound a little bit down, plugged up, or just straight up tired, that is because we are. One of us had a long production night. One of us had a sick day yesterday. And I am
coming off of.
I'm coming off of.
Can I out you on that?
I don't really care. I had COVID. It's been a hot minute. We did technically replay the last episode twice, just so that nobody would forget everything that we talked about. And what we talked about was cocaine in St. Clair County and essentially the effects that it has had on the crime and kind of the history. We're focusing mostly on the crime today, not the super hardcore intense crimes like the murders or anything like that. That will probably come in the next episode because, like an onion, as Nick said in a previous episode, you just keep peeling stuff back and you keep finding more and more things. But I'm hoping to cap this at 4 episodes at the very most. And this is number 2.
You never know, though.
I never know.
You don't want to limit yourself.
Yeah.
I never know, but at the same time, I would prefer to have this done so I can do something fun for October.
Oh, yeah.
It
is that time of year.
October 1st.
Yes, I want...
It's Dogman month.
I was going to say, I want to do the Dogman. Somebody needs to make sure I write up the Dogman script this month because I want to do it. Either way, thank you for tuning back in. It's been very, very hectic for everybody with sports season and more. So, kind of just getting right back into it. What do you guys remember that we talked about last time?
I think what we wrapped up on was how they were beginning to tackle the drug issue in Port Huron and in St. Clair County.
Yeah, throughout the 70s and 80s, cocaine and specifically crack cocaine, which when we ended the script, we kind of ended at 85, like right at the beginning of 85, which is where crack cocaine really exploded onto the scene. But either way, in the 70s and 80s, things were kind of building up, and it was not quite like a dam breaking in the usual way because, like, you would think that, like, oh, they got the drug task force, now they're going to hit the ground running. They did, but they didn't, if that makes sense.
Right. The task force was a little bit understaffed, correct?
Yeah. It also doesn't help that, because, again, 70s and 80s, this was the era of Miami Vice. I don't think that show helped anybody.
Yeah.
I don't think that show helped anybody, at least when it came to law enforcement, because I think law enforcement thought we're going to have the Miami Vice experience. It usually wasn't that.
Yeah.
Probably a lot dirtier and less glamorous.
I was going to say more like Cops.
Darker and depressing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not like shootouts with guys in mullets.
Right. They were expecting speedboats and cool car chases. It's usually not that.
Was it that sometimes though?
Sometimes, but you will see in a little bit. It's almost ironic that I even bring up the drug task force at all because they almost don't play a part in the major busts that I'm talking about today.
Okay.
Did we talk about the emergence of the drug task force in St. Clair County? Was cocaine a big factor in that, or was it more once crack showed up they started we better get a handle on this?
It really depends on how you look at it, because efforts began for the drug task force, like the push for it came in like 83, which 83 is when DARE started, when a lot of public education about
the war on drugs.
Yes. Yeah. So I don't think it was like cocaine was a big factor, but it was drugs in general that were a factor.
I think we kind of talked on the last episode too that cocaine was more of like a rich man's.
Yes, cocaine.
More of a white collar.
Yeah.
On like a national scale, it seemed like more of the concern, and when people started springing into action was the emergence of like the crack epidemic.
Yes. which crack unfortunately seemed to be targeted more towards neighborhoods of people of color, poorer neighborhoods, ghetto neighborhoods. And also we kind of touch into that side of things of like lives that have been ravaged, not because they were addicted, but because people around them are either addicted or are involved in the trade somehow or some way. So we'll be talking about a little bit of each of these pieces, if that makes sense. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I need to remind you guys specifically on, but I don't think like anything that like will need extra details I made sure to include in the script. So I think we should be good.
The main thing I remember from the last episode was that the sheriff lived on top of the jail.
Yes.
That's just something
old school
that really stood out. Yeah.
I actually re-listened to the episode last night just to make sure that I had everything correct. And yeah, you guys were really stuck on the jail part.
I hope it comes up again in this episode.
It won't.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm out.
Okay, sharks. So, on that topic though, despite a strong start with the St. Clair County Drug Task Force officially beginning operations on January 2nd, 1985, and its tip line installed in the same month, St. Clair County authorities had little idea of what was actually happening on their shores or what their citizens were even getting up to across the world. They also didn't know that their first year in action would be relatively quiet. Oh, sure, there were a few instances that made the paper, like in March when cocaine, almost 2 ounces of the stuff, valued between $16,500 and $30,000, was found stuffed in a brown paper sack in the passenger seat of a Smiths Creek woman's car. The task force had been tipped off by the LA police, who had in turn been tipped off by the UPS of the presence of the drugs. It was not sure how the shipping service became aware that they had shipped 55 grams of almost pure cocaine. But we do know that the St. Clair County Drug Task Force surveilled the woman for 48 hours before they arrested her and seized the cocaine. Initially charged with intent to deliver over 50 grams, she took a plea deal that let her plead to intent to deliver under 50 grams, which in turn allowed her a year in jail, with 9 months promptly knocked off after she paid costs and fines totaling $7,300, which is almost $21,000 today. A little bit over.
That doesn't seem like a bad punishment, all things considered.
Oh, no, definitely not.
There's also probably a chance that she wasn't the one paying that $21,000 either.
Yeah, I was going to say.
If she was actually distributing.
Like, if somebody is sending you 2 ounces of cocaine, I feel like they're also able to send you some money.
Yeah.
Doesn't the United States Postal Service have like their own law enforcement division or investigative division for that sort of thing? USPS,
yes. I'm not sure about UPS. In addition to the March incident, the Drug Task Force then conducted several drug arrests and raids in October 1985, but it wasn't until December did things heat up, with the task force learning of a drug ring that had allegedly operated right under their noses since 1982, just 10 miles north of Port Huron in Jeddo. According to the Detroit Free Press, it was in Jeddo, while the Times-Herald firmly put the home in Sanilac County's Worth Township. It felt very much like, this isn't our problem. This is Sanilac County. This isn't Jeddo. This is Sanilac County.
Is Jeddo not Worth Township?
It's right there.
It's one of those weird things where it's like, if you stand on one block, you're in St. Clair. If you stand in the other, you're in Sanilac.
Okay.
No, Sanilac did not have a task force at this point?
Not yet, no. They had a special response unit, but they did not have a task force. I don't believe they would get theirs until 1987 or 89, because that's about the time that the St. Clair County Drug Task Force was trying to help them get their funding. Sanilac County did not have their own drug task force, so it was St. Clair County who was brought in to help with the arrest. So, as they huddled just outside the home that December morning, the task force assisting the Sanilac County Sheriff's Office and Clinton Township Police, the excitement must have been palpable as they waited to be signaled into the belly of the beast. In a moment, they would be arresting a 33-year-old kingpin and his 21-year-old girlfriend. However, despite the excitement, the task force's involvement was limited in this case, though the alleged kingpin, Thomas Cross, had been arrested at his home in Jeddo, with officers finding the man asleep with 3 guns stashed near him. This case was all Macomb counties. According to the Macomb County Prosecutor's Office, though the Jeddo home was Cross's official address, it was the Clinton Township home that was the supposed center of illicit activity. When indicted for conspiracy to deliver and delivery of cocaine and marijuana, Cross was allegedly using the Clinton Township residence as a clearinghouse, where he brought his supply from Florida. At the height of his activity, it was alleged that Cross was overseeing a business making about $900,000 a week selling drugs, with cocaine bringing in $100,000 more than marijuana. With a grand jury indicting Cross, his girlfriend, Jean McCracken, and 10 other members of the alleged ring in late 1985, then prosecutor Carl Malinga felt he had a strong case despite missing one crucial thing: evidence. Despite the ring operating since 1982, it was a very close-knit one, to the point that Cross brought his own mother into the business. This meant that informants were unable to crack the shell and set up the crucial next step, procuring evidence via a drug buy. With no drugs and no money directly connecting the ring to the crime, Malinga and other investigators did get some of the ring to turn on the rest and confess by promising immunity. The case's star witness was Janet Mitchell, Cross's ex-girlfriend, and the older sister to his current girlfriend, Jean. McCracken and Mitchell are sisters.
Okay. Half-sisters then.
I believe so. So Mitchell insisted that she was not acting out of jealousy for her sister, insisting that she was testifying instead to end Cross's, quote, manipulative hold on her family, claiming that he had essentially fed her family drugs to keep them compliant. She also said that she was not getting paid for her testimony. She was, however, given immunity, as well as placed in a safe house and given a bodyguard, having been threatened for turning witness. Though there would be a few others in the ring who would come forward and corroborate some suspicions, there were other bits of the star witness testimony that just did not sit right. For instance, as proceedings started up on Tuesday, January 7th, 1986, Mitchell claimed on the stand that 27-year-old Joanne Skolarski and her sister Sandra had not only been to Cross's drug house in Clinton Township, but had taken a line of cocaine and even helped count out a $35,000 payment back in December 1984. Why are they being specifically mentioned, you may wonder. Well, in December 1984, Skolarski was 2 months away from getting engaged to Detroit Tigers star outfielder Kirk Gibson. And when Mitchell gave her testimony in January 1986, Skolarski and Gibson were on their honeymoon in New Zealand with Sandra and Sandra's husband, Detroit Tiger pitcher Dave Rozema, with whom the couple had shared a December double wedding with. Informed of the testimony, the couples were reportedly upset and concerned, with their response coming swiftly and through legal representation.
Can we back up a second?
Yeah.
So we have two sets of sisters.
Two sets of sisters. Janet Mitchell and Jean McCracken are the drug ring sisters. Mm-hmm. And then Sandra and Joanne Skolarski are the sports sisters.
Right. And they were implicated by Janet.
Yes. So one day after the testimony on January 8th, Nicholas Smith, a lawyer hired by Gibson to monitor the hearings, made clear that a slander suit could be in the works. According to Mitchell, Skolarski was allegedly close friends with Cross's girlfriend McCracken, and on the night in question had been at the house after picking McCracken and another drug ring member's wife up from the airport. They were returning from Florida, if you would believe it. So a bit of me is like, did Skolarski possibly transport cocaine in her car? We will never know. While it isn't clear if by confirming that Skolarski was at the home, he was confirming that she was friends with McCracken, Smith did make it clear that Skolarski had not even been in the same room as the money and cocaine, instead having a glass of wine that night. Furthermore, he said Sandra had never been to the home and even noted that in original testimony, Mitchell said that it was Sandra, not Joanne, who had done the line of cocaine. He also claimed that the introduction of Skolarski's actions into the proceedings was character assassination intended to lend some glamour to the prosecution. What didn't help was, during cross-examination later that week, Mitchell would once again contradict herself on the stand, claiming her original statement to police was incorrect.
You think they'd vet this before they put her up there?
You would think so, but again, probably get the feeling as I did as we go through this case that the prosecutor was really just throwing anything at the wall and trying to make it stick.
If they also didn't have any evidence, so they probably had to rely pretty heavily on the witness statements.
Yep.
So they probably really didn't have a choice.
Right. And again, that's going back to them making a bad decision, because it's like, if you don't have any evidence and you know that you're going to have to rely on this witness testimony, A, why haven't you vet it? And B, why haven't you tried to find anything to at least physically confirm some part of the testimony?
To corroborate what she's saying.
Right.
Hold off on doing it until you have that. I wonder if part of it was this war on drugs and like making the prosecution feel maybe a little more confident than they would have otherwise.
I definitely feel like that could be it, because this is just a messy case, and not because it's particularly evil or because there was like a lot of bad things happening. It's just because things were not handled to the standard that they should have been.
And this is the first case, the first big case the drug task force is proving themselves with.
Yeah. That Michigan and Macomb County and just that general high intensity drug trafficking area they're essentially trying to prove like, hey, we can handle our stuff. And at the moment, it definitely is just looking like they're peeving off literal Michigan sporting royalty.
So where was this tried at? Macomb County?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because he was arrested in Sanilac County.
He was arrested
by the St. Clair County Drug Task Force, and he's being tried in Macomb County.
Okay. I don't blame you if you guys...
This is going back kind of to the beginning, but he was arrested in Jeddo.
Yep.
And he was making $900,000 a week. Was he basically supplying like all of Sanilac County then? Or like what was the connection to Jeddo?
It seems that Jeddo was kind of his home, not a safe house necessarily.
You're kind of off the grid a little bit.
I was going to say it's more of his
compared to Macomb.
Yeah, it's more of his private residence, whereas the Clinton Township house, while he may have also technically lived there, it was a clearinghouse. It was the office.
So a lot of the distribution was in Clinton Township.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it would probably have been going out through Detroit as well as like probably back up into St. Clair County and then through to Sanilac.
Okay.
So were the Skolarski girls guilty of being a part of it, or are you getting to that?
Oh, I'm getting there.
Okay.
You mentioned slander. I don't think we should slander Kirk Gibson on this show. He's a Michigan legend. I just want to put that out there. I can't badmouth Gibby,
Gibby?
Yep.
So the prosecutor almost tripped over himself in his haste to make clear that no one was planning on bringing any charges against the Skolarski sisters, nor did anyone think that the Detroit Tigers had any tie to the ring. Despite making that statement that the Skolarskis and Gibson and the Detroit Tigers in general were not going to be affected by the case, it may have been a little bit too late because, so the testimony happened January 7th. The lawyer for Gibson comes in and talks to the prosecution and defense on the 8th. That same day, apparently, Gibson's newest contract was being finalized. So on Thursday, January 9th, it was announced that a last-minute provision was added to Gibson's contract that made drug tests mandatory.
Okay.
The Tiger president, Jim Campbell, said he wasn't singling Gibson out. It was something that they wanted to add to every Tigers contract. The timing is definitely a bit suspect.
Yeah.
Especially considering the fact that they made clear, like, this was a very last-minute provision, the drug testing. 11th hour, throw it in there.
Presumably other players' contracts are getting renewed too, right?
Presumably. I was going to say there was at least one other guy who, along with them, which, again, helps the Tigers with the whole, like, we're not singling him out.
They did amend the other contracts as well, and not just his. Do we know? Or?
I'm not quite sure, in part because there was a whole big thing with the players union, because at the time there were like the players union, like the club has to go through the players union for drug testing requirements for the players, not the players individually, because the players may feel like they can't say no
right
if it's like mandatory for them to drug test to play. So I did not look more into that.
Well, I would imagine, like you mentioned, the players union would probably have a big problem with that. I guess this would have been 1986.
Yeah.
I don't know what drug testing rules were like back then.
I was gonna say, what would they be testing for?
Cocaine.
I guess so. Like,
steroids wasn't a big thing until like the early 90s.
Right. Yeah, you could.
Which is part of the reason why I was like
steroids and HGH.
Because it was legal back then, steroids, in the mid 80s.
Which is part of the reason why I was extra confused / like, okay, this looks very suspect, even if they do have a second guy who had that provision also slapped on his contract. So if the mention of Michigan athletic royalty in testimony wasn't enough of a shot to the foot, Prosecutor Marlinga definitely tripped himself up, majorly so, by not having evidence usually seen in drug cases of the purported size that Malinga was saying this drug ring was.
Right. If they were accusing him of making $900,000,
like almost $1 million a week, then you should have.
But they didn't have any. Yeah.
Literally, like at one point, they were holding up like a clear plastic Ziploc baggie in court and asking Janet, "Is this the kind of Ziploc baggie they would like put the drugs in?"
Yeah.
Like that is, they did that.
So basically, they were monitoring this whole thing. And they knew all of the details of it and everything, but they didn't quite have what they needed to actually prove it in a court of law.
Right.
It was basically like, just trust me.
And they got like itchy trigger fingers and...
Right.
That's what it seems like.
Okay.
Yeah, for a case that saw 12 people indicted for a ring that allegedly raked in almost $1 million a week, there were no wiretaps, no undercover officers, no drugs, be it seized or bought. The prosecutor pish-poshed that, saying that he would prove the drug dealing by revealing the frequency of the drug deals, the size of the payments, and other suggestive details like Cross buying a 32-foot powerboat for about $75,000, over $200,000 now. And it's one of those things of like, yes, you can usually introduce circumstantial suggestive evidence like that, but they never made it clear how Thomas Cross legitimately made his money. So there was a chance that he could be like, I'm a contractor, of course I can buy a boat.
Right. Who is to blame for pulling the trigger on that? Would you be looking at the prosecutor's office in Macomb?
I would be blaming the prosecutor's office, but that's partially because Carl Malinga made himself the face of this investigation, if that makes sense. Like, he made himself up front and center.
But it's going to come back and make the St. Clair County Drug Task Force on their first big bust look like they have egg on their face.
Oh, just wait.
Yeah.
The amount of things that were happening basically under the nose of the Drug Task Force, like, and in some fairness to the Drug Task Force in the early days, it was literally the early days. They had just gotten their resources. If it took Macomb County so long to figure out the drug ring in Jetto, then who knows how long it would have taken the St. Clair County with a 2 years handicap on them. So I feel like the Drug Task Force got out of it better than the prosecutor did, but we'll keep going because you'll see. So, yes, they did have witnesses coming forward from within the ring, including a 25-year-old man who described his drug usage while with the ring, the processing, and the selling of the cocaine in exchange for immunity and reduced sentences and charges. But there were not enough witnesses to undo the damage that Janet did, perhaps because the ones that did come forward were allegedly harassed with phone calls from Cross. Cross never was charged with these phone calls, which makes me wonder if they actually happened.
He was making these phone calls while he was in jail?
Allegedly.
Okay.
Which is always... And don't get me wrong, I know that people can do a lot of things while in jail, things that the wardens and correctional staff would have no idea about, but there's also, like, I don't know, I feel like the phone area is usually pretty monitored.
Yeah, and also if you didn't have any evidence for your case against this guy, you would think that you'd probably be watching him pretty closely in jail to see if he slips up or anything.
And on the flip side, another reason why I think at least that witnesses weren't coming forward was because both the people who were still charged and also the people who would have been in the position to turn were just day by day watching the case fall apart. So it was one of those things of like, why don't I just like wait this out? Because like in 2 months, this may not be a thing.
Right.
For instance, first sign that things were falling apart was the judge overseeing the proceedings dropping Cross's harshest charge, the 650 lifer law, which we talked about that last time. That is the Michigan state law that is now repealed. But back in the day, if you were caught with over 650 grams or over, you were charged and sentenced to life in prison, essentially.
It kind of seems like he had no choice but to drop that charge. If they didn't have the actual evidence. Right. I mean, you could assume that he had that much on him at one point, but you don't have... Can't prove it.
Right, you don't have any of it physically.
I can't imagine that nowadays.
No.
Like someone trying to charge someone with charges as serious as we're hearing here without a single iota of drugs.
Right. quickly circling back. So 650 life for law charge got dropped from Cross's litany. He was still facing 30 charges, but that being said, he never ended up having to actually face any of those charges because January 8th, 1987, the defense that day moved to have all charges dismissed on the grounds that Mitchell had had an affair with her bodyguard when the grand jury stuff was starting up. Janet Mitchell, who was the star witness,
right,
had an affair.
So her court-appointed bodyguard?
And the defense made the argument, like, we don't know if, like, she was coerced into giving a different testimony. Like, we've seen that she's changed her testimony and has denied initial testimonies. So, like, do we know if that was because of him or do we know if it was because of the prosecutors? We don't know, so we should throw this out.
Yeah.
The prosecution told on themselves. The defense did not know about this until the prosecution filed a motion in court before the trial to ask the judge, hey, when we're at trial, can you make sure that the defense isn't allowed to ask about the affair that our client had with? And so, of course, the defense was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
What do you mean that they had this? Apparently, the assistant prosecutor knew about this around the same time that Janet Mitchell was going on the stand and implicating Skolarski. So while all that Skolarski stuff is going down, the assistant prosecutor at least knew she had had an affair and knew that she was in some way compromised.
Very much so.
Yeah.
The prosecutor, Merlinga, claims that he didn't know until the fall. I call BS, but that's just me.
He had to have known.
Oh, 100%. In my opinion, at least, since we have to add that. In my opinion, he 100% knew. The bodyguard, who was a police officer for Clinton Township, Officer William Sinkovich, he invoked his Fifth Amendment right 28 times when asked about the affair. It wasn't until he was promised immunity that he admitted that, yes, he had the affair. That being
seems like a solid move. I mean, it's what it's there for.
Right.
He got the immunity.
Yeah. That being said, despite all that hoopla, the judge was like, yeah, it should have been disclosed earlier, but we're going to let the case keep going. However, they officially had to throw the case out, still because of Sinkovich, because he illegally seized and searched mail by one of the co-conspirators. Phone bill, opened it up, took it out, looked at all the phone numbers, and just did investigation. And he was apparently part of the investigation. Like, Clinton Township police were apparently doing the investigation before they brought the DTF in. And again, he was invested in the case beyond just keeping this girl safe. Yeah, you would think that you wouldn't put an investigator that you would probably want on the stand at some point in the bodyguard position.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things that could go wrong there.
So many things that could go wrong. Not only did he, and technically Mitchell, because Mitchell was apparently helping him with this, they were stealing mail and going through this, and you could be like, well, that could have been used as evidence, right? Maybe, maybe not. We'll never know because he burned it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a federal crime, though, isn't it?
Yes. This whole case kind of burned me, not for the usual reasons that I'm usually, like, seething about a case, but just because, like, how dumb.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, when he was asked about, like, what he did with the phone bill, he said, like, oh, I destroyed it immediately. So he committed perjury the first time when he said, oh, I destroyed it immediately. He admitted, like, oh, I kept it, then I burnt it. And so by doing so, he affected the 4 cases, including Cross's and his mom's, 4 other cases in the ring, and the 4 cases were dismissed. The officer resigned from the Clinton Township Police, and Merlinga seemed to blame the case's failure solely on that police officer, as if he also hadn't dragged the case down with his own missteps. With that in mind, perhaps the St. Clair County Drug Task Force was thankful to have only been needed for the initial arrest. Still, they didn't really have time to catch their breath, with another big arrest happening April 28th, 1987, less than 15 miles outside of Port Huron. This time, however, the case was almost too close to home, with a Marysville police chief forced to testify against his own brother, a former candidate for county sheriff turned alleged international drug lord.
This is exciting.
And with that, we'll take our first break.
Stay tuned. Hour number 2 of Thumbing Through the Archives coming up right after your top of the hour news and weather right here on WMIC 660 AM and 95.3 FM.
All right, and we are back. So, while Thomas Cross spent his time in and out of court in 1986, the St. Clair County Drug Task Force was trying to leave a mark, especially with the rise of crack cocaine reported in the area. However, despite no statistics to back them up at the time, police were claiming the drug caused more crimes, attributing robberies to addicts looking to fund a fix. By July of 1986, 14 people had been arrested for crack, more than double the arrests the task force made for the same offense the previous year. The Canadian drug trade was still booming, with Port Huron police saying that drugs were also coming from Detroit and Mount Clemens. There was also a shift to focusing on educating the public about drugs, with efforts like DARE taking the country by storm around this time, and the FBI and Detroit police visiting over 82 middle schools across the state for that purpose. I say this in an attempt to properly set the scene for you, as it could all have been straight from a movie. It is April 28th, 1987, about 9 o'clock at night. The day had been a typical spring one, kind of chilly, kind of cloudy, but nothing much to fret over in Michigan. John Joseph O'Boyle, a 48-year-old family man, was home for the night, perhaps relaxing from a long day of business. He sold construction equipment, a job that took him out of state and out of country often, but it made good money, making about $30,000 to $40,000 a year, which is about $83,000 to $110,000 now. So, good living. And he was providing for his family, so his neighbors must have been confused, if not aghast, to see DEA agents arrive at his home on Norman Street in Clyde Township. This is not to say that O'Boyle was a perfect man. Far from it, as his past would bear out. By the time that he was getting arrested in 1987, he had been arrested by state police in 1971 on complaints that he had misused money while doing business as O'Boyle Construction Company. In 1974, he served 30 days in the county jail after pleading no contest to a charge of conspiracy to engage in an illegal business. In 1977, he shot and killed 34-year-old Michael J. Sopa. He contended that it was an accidental shooting, which occurred when he and Sopa were wrestling for a weapon during a fight. A 1978 jury found him innocent. He was formally acquitted of second-degree murder and carrying a concealed weapon. August 1981, he was convicted for violating a federal statute that prohibits the interstate transportation of money taken by fraud. A jury in U.S. District Court Detroit found O'Boyle guilty of converting $26,000 from the Intercontinental Corporation in Marysville for his own use and transporting it to Dallas, according to an FBI spokesman. This almost seems like a jarring resume when you consider that in 1968 he had run as a Republican candidate for sheriff, albeit unsuccessfully. What made the arrest more jarring was that John hadn't been the only one in the family to pursue a career in law enforcement, though his brother Patrick O'Boyle and nephew Tim O'Boyle seemed to have a better go with wearing the badge. When John was arrested in 1987, Patrick was chief of police in Marysville, and Tim was part of the drug task force.
Wow.
Yeah.
So both were his brothers?
Tim was his nephew.
Nephew, okay.
I think it's kind of funny that he ran for sheriff and he didn't win, and he was like, well,
gonna do crime.
Yeah, better turn to a life of crime then. I tried to do it the right way.
I tried to do it the right way.
I tried.
Yeah. To my understanding, Tim is Patrick's son. So law enforcement runs in the genes, apparently.
So the nephew was
a DTF agent,
of the original DTF. So
if not the original, then one of the starting classes, yeah.
Right. So in 1987, he was part of the drug task force.
Yeah.
That's awkward.
Yeah. The drug task force connection in the family may have made the news that much more shocking, with the DEA claiming that O'Boyle was facing charges because he was working as distribution for a UK, so Britain, like full-on Europe, for a UK-based cocaine ring, the biggest uncovered in Europe at that point.
Wow. So he's big time.
Apparently. This information came from O'Boyle's supposed business partner, a Detroit man named David Madin, who avoided life sentences in the case by becoming an informant. Medin had been caught in London with 80 pounds of cocaine in a suitcase, which was the beginning of the end for the operations, as it were.
That must have been the biggest suitcase ever, too. 80 pounds.
80 pounds. Yeah.
How would you even... I don't know.
I hope it was a roller.
Yeah, it must have been.
I was gonna.
It had to have been.
I'm just picturing like a comically large suitcase.
Like an overstuffed.
A trail of powder behind it.
Yeah.
Honestly,
oh man, how'd they catch me?
Honestly, that may be it, because like it was definitely one of those things of like, well, how did they catch him? Because he apparently was able to get it off the plane.
Right.
But no, apparently when he was going through the airport, something, be it the large bulky bag or the powder that was trailing behind it. I don't know if there was actually leaking powder, but it would not surprise me, honestly.
I would assume that maybe they were just waiting until he completed like
a run or something.
Yeah, like the full crime, so then they could get him.
I think like for packaging purposes, to go back, I think you can like compress it real tight.
That is true.
Make it like
So maybe he wasn't bulging, but it's still probably they probably were like, why is this guy struggling with a perfectly normal suitcase?
Right.
Yeah.
So not only did Medin get caught with 80 pounds of cocaine, but he claimed to authorities that the American mafia was in on it. Given the time period, it's that fun game of, are they lying or are they very much telling the truth?
This person in the suitcase who got caught with it is
David Medin, who business partner of
O'Boyle.
Yes.
Okay.
Medin was claiming mafia connections. He was also claiming that the alleged plan involved bringing 100 kilograms of cocaine into the country every week. So by the time O'Boyle was arraigned, Medin had been tried and sentenced in the UK, where he testified that O'Boyle had stashed about 60 kilograms, about 132 pounds of cocaine in various equipment, like tractors, and like apparently popping stuff off the legs, as it were, and just hiding it under the protective metal and just plopping it back over, shipping it, and voila, you have lots of cocaine over in the UK. However, the Times Herald reported on May 4th, 1987, that O'Boyle was claiming that he was also an informant for the DEA, and that the DEA had basically abandoned him in his time of need now.
Do you think his nephew knew about this? It's like, yeah, well, we'll cover for you, Unc. Like,
oh, just wait. I don't know anything about the nephew, but the brother. Oh, the brother.
And maybe we'll get to it, but what would be the motivation for the DEA to not help him anymore? Like,
well, we'll actually get to that in a second. So he was working with the DEA to essentially help them find a Bolivian source of cocaine. Like, he would set up drug deals, but instead of him going, it would be the DEA, and bam, you got your cartel. But this UK stuff, they were saying,
was unrelated.
Yeah. Like, we did not condone that dealing. Definitely not at that size.
That's a pretty bold move.
It is.
To be working with the DEA and then also doing side deals.
You think it just gives you like a blanket protection, but that's not how this works, bro.
It definitely was not how it worked. In light of that, the DEA was like, we don't owe you crap, bro. Like, you're the one who crossed us.
Right.
You were fine until you did that. So David Dean, former assistant prosecutor at the St. Clair County.
There he is.
Yep, at the St. Clair County Prosecutor's Office, and O'Boyle attorney for his extradition hearings. Part of the reason why Nick says here he is, listeners, is because we will be getting back to him in lots more detail in either the third or the fourth episode of this series.
What was the name?
David Dean.
Okay.
There's a full circle thing it'll come back to at some point.
I wish that the cases that we're talking about today weren't as complicated and as weird as they were, because I would have totally fit in David Dean into this section because of
he needs his own episode.
He does need his own episode. David Dean pops up a lot as he represents a lot of drug dealers or people who are on drug offenses in this time period.
Okay.
David Dean, he was representing O'Boyle for the extradition hearings, and he was allegedly unaware of his client's drug deal. So he said, oh yeah, O'Boyle contacted me to ask me to help him with his extradition stuff. I said, yeah. When O'Boyle reveals in court, like, I'm working with the DEA. Dean's like, I had no idea.
That's classic David Dean.
Yeah. Yeah, just very much, I had no idea. And also saying, I had no idea my client was being threatened. My client and his family were getting death threats from Bolivian cartels for a drug debt.
Right.
With a deadline of May 10th. As the situation develops, May 10th, death deadline comes and goes, no issues. O'Boyle keeps claiming that Medin was falsely implicating him to reduce his own time, calling him a psychopathic liar and denying any relation to the mafia. Still, he waived extradition in June 1987 and was extradited to the UK in July of that year. He awaited trial as Medin had more time knocked off his sentence for, snitching. Medin further testified that O'Boyle would allegedly organize and control the shipments of drugs from Bolivia, while Medin concerned himself with Europe.
So if O'Boyle is committing a crime, he was in America while he's committing these crimes, right?
Allegedly, yeah.
So why? Because the criminal part of it is taking place on foreign soil, so that...
Because the cocaine ended up in the UK and is meant for selling in the UK.
Even though he's orchestrating it
from
on American
America.
soil, it doesn't matter.
Apparently not.
Okay.
The whole case was a legal gray area. O'Boyle was technically the first American to be extradited to the UK on drug charges.
If I was a drug dealer, I'm not, but if I were, that seems like a safer way of doing it.
Yeah.
Like, I can see how that would give you a false sense of security. Like,
right.
Well, technically, I'm not.
It's over in Britain.
Right. It seems very far away. It seems like you're not maybe actually committing a crime.
Right.
On paper.
Right. This whole case is a mess.
Yeah.
Because O'Boyle continues to deny it, kind of like the last case that we just discussed. There's bits and points where it's like, okay, we know for sure that you did that, but you're not saying it, so actually we don't have the evidence to officially show it, so...
Right.
So O'Boyle would allegedly organize and control the shipments from Bolivia, while Medin concerned himself with the European side of things. O'Boyle was also accused, both by Medin and another witness and co-conspirator, that he would rough up subordinates, with one British co-conspirator apparently calling him an American thug. It would be an entire year of slacking through legalities and international court proceedings before the news would pick up the story again, with it being October 1988 by the time John's brother, Patrick, the police chief in Marysville, was called to the stand in London, adding a weird twist to an already odd scenario, as he testified that the whole thing started because John was trying to lure drug dealers into the area for Patrick, the police chief, to have an easier but more high-profile arrest record, as it were.
That would also benefit his nephew as well,
yes.
who was on the drug task force.
Yeah. Patrick didn't directly mention Tim in his...
Right. Yeah,
that being said, though, it is...
You could assume,
yeah. Considering the fact that it's like, oh, Marysville is part of St. Clair County. He is part of the St. Clair County Drug Task Force.
So he was just a good brother.
I should have known that was coming from you, Mr. I have three brothers.
Well, if one of them was the chief of police in Marysville, I'd want to help him out.
Keegan would sell you out.
Well.
No, Tommy would.
If I made him go on trial in London, at that point I would just, I'd...
Well, that's different.
Yeah.
No, Tommy would sell you out before you get to trial even.
Yeah. Tommy would be he'd be a clean cop. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mike, meanwhile, most crooked one out there.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a cop. I ran for sheriff, but I didn't win.
Michael.
So now I just try and lure criminals into the area that I live.
What year did you run, Mike?
1968 as a Republican.
And how old are you?
It's not important.
How long have you been covering sports?
That's why he knows all that stuff about Gibby.
Yeah.
He was like, wait till I tell you about Babe Ruth.
Yeah. Let me tell you about the 1968 World Series.
Oh my God.
Is that the one the Tigers were in? Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have
it's convenient.
That.
Yeah.
The radio broadcast here. Yeah.
Let me tell you about Bob Gibson.
Yes, apparently in Mike's book, John O'Boyle, is it John or Patrick who gets the Best Brother of the Year award? Well, John, because he was the one luring, and Patrick was the one
snitching. Depends on if Patrick is going to sell him out or not.
Well, he did.
Oh, he did? Okay.
Well, he's on the stand.
Well, that doesn't mean he has to sell him out.
I think that's technically what it does mean.
Yeah.
You can't, unless he wants to perjure himself. And again, even though it's a UK thing, it doesn't look good.
Right. It's fair.
So most contemporaries at the time believed that the whole idea of the whole luring drug dealers in was John's idea, because according to the likes of Robert Cleland and the current sheriff at the time and just his law enforcement peers, Patrick O'Boyle was not the type to seek out headlines, which is...
It just seems like such a terrible defense in the first place, because how would you know these criminals, first of all?
Right. Would your brother tell them to like wear a funny hat when they go to meet?
Right.
So
well, like,
they could tell, like...
Yeah, how would, like...
You're also simultaneously implicating yourself that
right.
you've known about criminal activity
right.
and are just bringing it to light when it benefits you professionally.
Right.
Yeah.
But then he also wasn't he didn't claim that he was working with his brother, right? He just said that he was bringing them.
It depends on the articles that you read. Because, for instance, in the British ones, because they don't have as big of a stake in Patrick's personal life as the Times Herald does, they were very much like, oh yeah, he basically was like, yeah, we were working together, he would lure them in, I would arrest them, so on and so forth. Whereas Times Herald kind of played coy and made it seem like maybe Patrick was working with him, or maybe he was just tempted to and was asking, and maybe asked John to like do it once to see if he liked it. It's weird.
Okay.
The Times Herald doing what the Times Herald does.
Yeah. The Times Herald did end up doing some good work, which we'll get into in the next section. Most contemporaries were like, oh, that wouldn't be Patrick. And then others, including Robert Cleland, would insist, oh, it's not unusual in drug cases for family members of investigators to be informants.
So was this guy on paper as being an informant?
Right. Like,
apparently, officially, John O'Boyle was at one point an informant for the DEA, but
not for
the British stuff.
And not for St. Clair County.
No.
Because even if he was an informant for his brother, there would still have to be some type of record for that.
You would think.
Maybe not. I don't know. This might be a dumb question, but is there a law against luring criminals into an like? I know there's like entrapment laws, but like, what law would he technically be breaking by? If what he was claiming was true, like he was just trying to get criminals to come to an area where his brother could arrest them, what would technically be illegal about that?
The drug deals that he would be luring them in with.
Okay.
Yeah, that's so ridiculous. The more I'm thinking about this whole thing, like, it's such a ridiculous play for them to do that. And for this guy, this Marysville police chief, to just like throw away his entire...
Oh, he still stayed.
I'm sure he did.
Oh, yeah. Yes. But yeah, no, Cleland was like, no, it's completely fine for informants of drug deals to be related to investigators.
By conveniently not addressing the fact that it's an international drug ring.
And that it's a police chief.
Right.
Who usually isn't involved in drug stuff. Like, again, if there was a family member to make this deal with, it would have been more sense with the DTF member. Mm-hmm. But no, he went for the Marysville chief of police, which I guess kind of shows maybe how dumb they are. Dumb because either, like, if it did happen, dumb. If it didn't happen, dumb to even suggest / make up this story kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Right. What would be the benefit of making up that story?
Right. Like, there is no benefit. It just makes everybody look bad.
Because it still doesn't help his case with the UK stuff.
No. No, like, it could have been the brother's testimony. It could have been the business partner's testimony. We're not sure what officially did O'Boyle in, but he was sentenced to 18 years in UK prison after a 6-week trial. Throughout it all, he maintained that there were no mafia connections, even as the plot has supposed connections to the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, which is a paramilitary group that sought to end British rule in North Ireland and unite Ireland, with some members attempting to do so via acts of terrorism between 1969 and 1994. So, that being said, I don't know if the IRA connection was actually a thing, because they would say it in the same breath as a mafia thing. So it was one of those things of like, I don't know if the IRA was actually involved and they had actual proof of it, because they definitely did not show very much of that proof in their newspaper articles, or if it is like how in America, if you want to like suggest criminality or suggest like bad people, it's like, oh, mob ties suspected, that kind of thing, but with the IRA instead. It's very hard to know, honestly. O'Boyle, despite being sentenced to 18 years in prison in December 1988, he would serve less than 3 years. His conviction was overturned by a panel of 3 British appeal judges who found that there were serious irregularities in the case, such as not trying O'Boyle separately from the subordinates he supposedly abused. So when he was put on trial, he was put on trial at the same time with the guy who was calling him an American thug and claiming that he had been beaten up by Boyle. The judges were like, that could have obviously biased the crap out of some people.
Right.
So that wasn't right. And then there was a point in the trial that I'm not sure if it was like after testifying or if it was during testimony, but either way, the judge was trying to have O'Boyle come back to the witness box, and O'Boyle technically was within his rights to refuse, but the judge issued a threat, essentially like, I will put you in jail if you do not get your butt in that box. So because of that, the conviction got overturned, and he returned to St. Clair County in July 1990, a broken man who was denied phone calls to family during his time in jail and feeling as if the government had left him out to dry. He was not the only one feeling that way when it came to the matters of drugs, however. Sure, different reasons connected to drugs and why they were feeling those particular ways, but many St. Clair County residents felt the same, with Port Huron's South Park area, particularly the Dull Hut Village housing projects, feeling utterly abandoned as the war on drugs waged around them. And we'll be right back in just a moment. So, away from all the big drug busts and glamorous like stories and trial cases and more, one the area's problems were particularly focused on in April 1988, the Drug Task Force had been active for less than 3 years, and their efforts were focused a bit more now on public education, with them patting themselves on the back when their Sanilac County counterparts received funding in 1987, making that another team to help them take on the growing threat. Which, side note, Sanilac County DTF will get their own episode because they also are interesting. Yeah, Sanilac County got their task force funding in 1987, and around the same time, a growing awareness, as it were, of not problem spots, because it definitely was not the residents who originally lived there that were at fault. It's just there were certain spots in Port Huron that drug culture and crime crept into a lot easier than others. And one of those places was in South Park, Port Huron, in the Dull Hut Village. A growing threat that continued to flourish under the noses of the St. Clair County Drug Task Force was the 120-unit project dubbed Little Detroit due to the amount of crack and violence that permeated the building. Some residents who spoke to the Times-Herald did so without giving their name, fearful of retaliation by the drug dealers they lived next to. One mother recounted holding her breath whenever she heard feet pounding the ground outside her apartment door, because it was never kids running as they played. It was almost always the narcotics unit coming to arrest yet another dealer. Residents reported seeing drug deals happening in plain sight, people using guns at the slightest of provocation, and using guns so often and carelessly that the mother who was talking kept her children inside. Like, she made them sit on the couch, not move, because that was the only spot where the bullets would not come through the window directly at them. So she kept them inside, and then she sent her, and he was like under 10 years old. He was just a little guy, but she sent her oldest child to live with his grandparents because he was just so traumatized. I think he was older than 5, but younger than 10. So just a little guy and already traumatized by gunfire outside of his own home. Families feared stray bullets, and children of all ages in the area were all too aware of what gunshots sounded like and also what they meant. The South Park neighborhood of Port Huron was deemed the most afflicted in 1988, with the area receiving 12 raids from between February 1987 and April 1988. Authorities mused that Detroit's crackdown on drug dealers around the same time had probably sent most of the dealers packing and looking for a new market, moving to smaller but still urban areas like Port Huron. The demand for cocaine and the supply that they were able to get meant that the dealers could keep prices where they liked, with a crack rock worth $10 in Detroit being worth $25 in Port Huron. Even as residents began to flee Delhut Village, authorities seemed more intent on big busts than everyday occurrences with the neighborhood drug dealer. It wasn't until after July 1988, when authorities declared the county was a pipeline for drugs from both Detroit and Canada, did seizures seem to pick up in the Delhut area, with one resident telling the Times-Herald that they had been praying for this day as they watched another dealer arrested. Like, literally, residents were going out onto their front yard, like, and not in the whole typical nosy neighbor way, because these people were scared to come out of their homes regardless. It was more so like, oh, they're finally arresting so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so. They were the ones who made our block the most unsafe. We can actually come out now.
Right. They're like seeing sunshine for the first time because
right.
The drug dealer down the way got arrested. Yeah. That's almost too accurate, honestly. There were certain aspects of cocaine and crack in St. Clair County that were either unknown or fully ignored by the Drug Task Force, with St. Clair County authorities surprised to learn in February 1989 that 75% of addicts treated in the county for cocaine were middle class. The Drug Task Force would admit in late 1989 that the 8-member team was too small to handle the epidemic, of course, with the task force estimating that in the county there were 300 crack addicts, 6 to 10 crack houses, and at least 3 of those houses were open at any given 8-hour period of a day. So at any given time, you would be able to find at least 3 crack houses open and willing to sell you something, which, again, these are somewhat conservative, but the fact that they're estimates is something that will come back to bite them in the butt. So one such crack house could turn out $2,500 or over $6,000 a day. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What is a crack house?
A crack house is essentially, it is both the place where you buy the crack and you take the crack.
So you can hang out there and smoke crack all day.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I thought. So it's like a dealer, but it's also like, here, hang out here.
I was going to say, it's like a dealer and motel without the rental, yeah.
Lay on this bare mattress and smoke crack.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So by 1991, things had become much worse, with 4 out of 5 crimes estimated to be tied to narcotics, with robbery once again seen as a way for addicts to fund a fix. In 1992, then County Prosecutor Robert Nickerson said that the local crack cocaine business was generating $3 million, with cartels to be possibly counted in the top 50 employers of U.S. residents at the time. Nationwide, the number was more like $300 billion in business, and purportedly 5 to 10 families controlled the whole supply in Bolivia. Even if half of these shipments were halted, the Bolivian cartel would still make good money, so it was no surprise that everyone wanted a bite of the pie. In Port Huron, Detroit gangs were believed to control half of the coke market, while the other half was controlled by a then 19-year-old kid. The kid, I think they nicknamed him Richie Rich for obvious reasons.
What year was this?
This was 92 or 91.
Wow.
So, yeah, he was 19. He had started selling drugs when he was like 14 or so, basically worked his way up to overseeing 90 drug dealers.
Was he originally from Port Huron?
I believe so.
50% of cocaine and crack, or just coke? Or
I think they're talking about just cocaine.
The market in general.
The market in general, yeah. So would probably count both. And I was not really able, in part because they didn't really identify him by name in the reports.
He's probably on like a witness protection now.
Oh, 100%. I was going to say, it doesn't seem like any case was brought against him, and I don't know if he was ever officially caught. They just knew Richie Rich was doing his thing.
Mm-hmm.
All this to say, it was clear to the public that things were happening, but then where was the drug task force in all of this? Despite its initial popularity, and like it passed successfully the first 3 or so times that it was voted for, people were very much for it. Robert Cleland and Sheriff Doctor were hanging their hats on it, so on and so forth. Despite that initial popularity, the task force was becoming a costly, secretive, and unregulated proposition, with at least one instance where a drug task force supervisor was accused of embezzling $6,000, with it being dismissed due to lack of evidence. St. Clair County Drug Task Force claimed that between its beginnings in 1985 and 1996, they had conducted 342 raids, made 1,044 arrests, confiscated 351 weapons, and seized drugs totaling $3.9 million. But this was all called into question when the Times-Herald looked a bit closer at the records in 1997. The first red flag the newspaper found, despite starting in 1985 and supposedly having stuff to audit starting in 1985, there was no audit to the Drug Task Force books until 1990. So 5 years. And of course, when a state police investigation started, like they brought in like an accountant to go over all this and everything like that. And there was a lot of meetings, like they kind of being like, hey, can you meet with me such and such day so that we can just quickly knock this out and you can tell me what I need to know so that some of the numbers make more sense, so on and so forth. And the drug task supervisor, like everybody who was in charge or related to that, would keep passing the buck, rescheduling, avoiding, just to the point where the accountant was to the investigators like, this is one of the hardest audits I've done, and it's not even the numbers' fault.
Right.
Because of that, discrepancies were technically hard to pin down at first, but as you got further into the books, things started becoming clear. For instance, it was found by the state police that money that was missing was being used at strip clubs. Drugs were being used by officers.
We're talking about like money that was brought in as evidence would just go missing from...
Yes. Money would be used at strip clubs, drugs were being used by officers, and that seized drugs were also being used to trade for sexual favors. In addition, the task force could not account for at least $40,000 of the estimated $131,000 spent on drug buys that year. So in modern terms, that's almost $100,000 out of $325,000 going missing.
A year? Or just during the audit period?
During the audit period.
Like 87 to 90 or something like that.
Yeah. The 1997 investigation by the Times-Herald also revealed that the task force paid almost $11 for every $1 of illicit substances it seized, whereas in a similar county, both with drug issue and also population, which was Berrien County at the time, they were reportedly seizing $3.11 worth of drugs for every $1 they spent on their program.
So they're spending $11
to seize $1 of drugs,
right,
while Berrien County is spending $1 to seize.
So they're not getting as much return for their money as...
Not at all.
Right.
Like almost laughably bad value.
Would that mean that they're just doing like way more buys before they make a bust, or...
It could mean that they're doing way more buys before they do a bust, or, as it seems to be in this case, signifies that money is going towards things that aren't as important. Like, for instance, also in this same report, they pointed out, like, the drug task force officers have these really nice sports cars that they get to drive home.
Miami Vice.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah. The county pays for the sports cars and the gas that they use to commute with the sports cars. That kind of thing.
Right.
So, like, a lot of things, like, where you could technically, there was a physical thing that you could connect the cost to, but whether or not that cost was allocated originally is the next question.
Yeah. At this point, would the drug task force fall under the supervision of the sheriff's department, or would it be like its own entity?
Technically, it is supervised by the sheriff's office, with Sheriff Dan Lane in 1997 being a very large proponent for it. Also, kind of going back to your question, there's also a question of if they were actually spending that much money, because the busts that they were making were grossly overinflated by like 78% of value.
They inflated the value of their bust to make it look better.
Yeah, so remember how I was telling you, like, oh, they thought like $900,000 was coming in from marijuana and cocaine. May have been more like 500,000 if it was still that large. One of the most egregious examples that happened in St. Clair County was a really big bust where they claimed they seized a whole bunch of marijuana plants, and technically they did, but where they placed the price on those plants like in the millions and everything like that, the plants were not bearing any product. They were seedlings. They were 4 inches tall. They had no monetary value drug-wise. And even a former state police investigator who worked drug cases was like, those are worthless.
Right.
Like, for an investigation, for anything, that's worthless. So yeah, they, in situations as egregious as that, and then as simple as like, you got sold a $10 crack rock, but you say it was $25. So, which again calls into question, like, well, how much did you actually seize then?
Right. And what else are you exaggerating?
Yeah. To add insult to injury, some years for the drug task force, more drugs were brought in by drug buys than actual seizures. In addition to inflating the drug seizures, there was also, of course, the question of racism, and also the question of how effective the arrests actually were. So, for instance, only one of 103 charges filed between 1994 and 1996 involved over 50 grams of cocaine. So 102 offenses that the DTF prosecuted / took to court.
They're not going after the dealers. They're just getting the poor soul addicted to the drug who's buying their next fix.
100%.
Yep.
Though the task force defended themselves by asserting they were going off the projected street value, what the dealer could have charged for the drugs, it didn't change that despite so many arrests, 44 of those arrested were either never charged or had their charges dropped. 44%. Not only that, but more than half of those arrests came from Port Huron, and 41% of those arrested were people of color, despite only making up 5.1% of the county's demographic at the time. Analysis also showed that not only would minorities be 20 times more likely to be arrested than their white counterparts, but people of color were more likely to receive jail time and be sentenced to 15 months longer in jail than their white counterparts, who, if they got jail time, would only get 2 months in jail.
Is this just St. Clair County?
This is just St. Clair County that they looked at.
Now, to play devil's advocate, an argument could be made that, well, in those populations, you have higher incidences of drug use.
Oh, trust me, they made that argument.
Okay.
Sergeant Bloomfield said race does not play a role in who the Drug Task Force targets. Drug Task Force records show that minorities make up more than 41% of the agency's arrests in a county that is 94.9% white. Blacks account for 2.2% of the county's population, but made up 34% of those arrested by the Drug Task Force over the last 3 years. Quote, in certain types of drugs, they're the predominant race, Sergeant Bloomfield said. The control of crack cocaine has predominantly been the black community, but I think you're starting to see that change. This is not a race issue anymore, it's a money issue now.
What's he mean by that?
So
by the last sentence there.
The people that can't afford cocaine are resorting to
I was
crack,
worried that's what he meant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course it meant what you thought it meant.
So you're also like putting your foot in your mouth, though, by suggesting, well, we're not going after the people who can afford it.
Yeah.
Who can afford cocaine.
Yeah.
Right.
And then as it just kept getting worse, because at the time of the article, there were no black officers on the drug task force, but they did have one Hispanic man and one white woman working the 9-member unit. Sergeant Bloomfield, Sheriff Lane, and Mr. Brown said they could not remember how many minorities have served since its inception, though at least one black man previously served as a member of the squad.
This big expose that the Times Herald did they call out any of this?
Oh, they called out
what appears to be racism.
Oh, that what I just read was directly from Times Herald.
There. Okay, cool.
And then they also, I was unfortunately not able to fully get into it, in part because I wanted to cover it a little bit when I covered David Dean, since some of his stuff smacks of this. But civil forfeitures were also a huge issue, to the point where at times it seemed that the drug task force was more focused on seizing stuff than drugs.
I think there was a culture of that at that time period in St. Clair County in general, in the government.
Yeah, there definitely was something going on, especially because, and apparently for forfeiture stuff, you basically have to pay so that you can argue to get it back.
Right.
And most people,
if they're in that position to begin with, they can't afford to pay bail on it.
Exactly. So I'm trying to remember the exact stats, but over 50% of the cases, like if not 75-ish of the cases for forfeiture stuff, like usually they ended up defaulting because they couldn't afford the bail.
So then what happens to something after that? Is it put in evidence, or like an impound lot kind of thing?
Well, for one guy, he got charged with, I believe, possession of cocaine. His car was taken away. He could not make bail on it, so it was sold at a police auction, and then a week later the judge dropped the charges that started the whole thing in the first place. But the car was already sold.
Where's that money go?
Into the drug task force.
Right.
And that is also part of the reason
for the sports cars.
Yes. And also just for a lot of distrust, and also just there's a lot of things that money that's not supposed to be yours can buy and can be pawned and can be sold. And I was going to say jewelry, clothing, lots of luxury goods were also that kind of thing.
Right.
So it's like, even if you could afford to do cocaine, it seems that it really didn't matter who was doing the drug as long as they had cool stuff to steal. They did bring in the oversight board after all of this, but it was kind of like Band-Aid on a machete wound. And again, to the task force, these were very minor issues, as they were more focused on the fact that in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a rash of deaths being caused by drugs, be it dealers killing people who can't pay up, well-placed hits on people within a drug ring, or just people overdosing. There was a lot of death happening, and in the midst of all that, there was also one very prominent lawyer, who technically we did mention, that was falling from grace and seemingly trying to drag everyone he could down with him. And that's the end of my written script, at least, for this week.
So does that mean the next episode's going to be about the lawyer?
Probably.
Okay.
I like the seeing where you're going with it, the segues, because I'm not going to lie, when we recorded the first one,
oh yeah, I had no idea.
Weeks ago, and I was sitting here and we're like learning about how cocaine is made, and I was like, okay, where is this going to end up though? Like, where are we going with this? And then I kind of started seeing it at the end of the last episode, and now I see where you're going, and it's very exciting.
It's very, I don't want to say convoluted, because I definitely did not try to make it that way.
No, but it's a convoluted topic, and you're doing a good job of peeling it back and approaching it from the ground up.
The number of factors to distrust is just like exponentially more than like, because at least with historical stuff, like at least with the Sparling stuff, even if I wasn't 100% sure on the veracity of a fact, it's like, well, this is what they wrote down.
Right.
And I can't ask anybody else. Whereas now, there are some people that I could find and ask. It's a messy topic. And frankly, I don't think it's cleaned up in the time that has passed between when I was talking about and today.
Right.
But yeah, how you guys feeling?
So I have a question about, just a general question. When the drug task force was formed in St. Clair County and then a few years later in Sanilac County, how new was that idea or that concept, like statewide and, countrywide?
Statewide and countrywide. Well, if you remember, the drug task force for St. Clair County technically started after they had a federal program come in with their own task force and kind of train them to, if not start their own task force, at least have like a mini section in there. And that was like early 80s. So I definitely feel like, at least for the rural areas, it doesn't surprise me that it was 87, 88. Technically, I'm surprised that it was 85 for St. Clair County. That's pretty early in comparison for rural areas.
Yeah.
In Detroit, it would have been more like as soon as they noticed, so maybe 83, 84.
Okay. Because, obviously things got out of control once you got to the late 80s and then the 90s and stuff. But with the very first case that we talked about, they did screw up quite a bit, but you could also kind of chalk some of that up to
growing pains.
Hey, we've never done this before.
Right.
We're still trying to figure things out.
I was going to say, it's possibly a little bit of growing pains. I would give that more benefit of the doubt if it was mistakes on the St. Clair County Drug Task Force, if they made a mistake during the arrest that cost the prosecutor the whole case.
Doesn't sound like it was them.
No, it doesn't. No. I was going to say, again, they lucked out and just had to help with the initial arrest. They didn't have to walk around with the egg on their face until the 90s.
So that guy, he never ended up being charged with anything.
Not at least related to that ring, no.
What do you think happened in his life after that? What do you think he got up to?
I tried to look him up, and again, as with most very rich criminals, once they get in trouble or come close to getting in trouble, usually they go dormant.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure. I can tell you what O'Boyle got up to, because O'Boyle tried to go the quiet route, and then in the early 2000s there was his house caught on fire.
Okay.
But it was the house that he had been building for years. They basically think that he set the house on fire for insurance money.
Right.
So for John O'Boyle,
based on his criminal history, that would kind of line up.
I was going to say, so John O'Boyle, he's doing what he keeps doing, but he was also 50 when he got out, so he couldn't really remake himself as easy as a 35-year-old could.
Right.
How long did his brother stay police chief?
I'm pretty sure at least 5 more years. I need to look up Tim O'Boyle, but I'm pretty sure that he stayed with the drug task force into the 90s, or at least with the sheriff's office into the 90s. And that was also another reason why the drug task force was such a big pain oversight-wise, because of the nature of the work with the undercover officers. That's how they kept pushing off any questions of wrongdoing. Even when there was reason to be asking, hey, we've noticed in the audit book that so-and-so went to Bisco's. What gives? Well, that was undercover work, so you really can't ask about that.
Right.
That was their kind of thing.
Yeah.
And in some ways, that hasn't really changed. But before the oversight board, they were able to use that a lot more. Any more questions, guys?
Richie Rich seemed like a pretty interesting character.
I wish that there was more on him, because I wanted to dive more into him, because 19 years old, 90 drug dealers.
It kind of sounds like, was it White Boy Rick? Or
right.
kind of a similar situation.
But
right around that time, Kid Rock's last name was Rich. It could have been
that would have been
Richie.
Oh my God. He
would have been that age too. What if it wasn't?
We make that joke.
Romeo's not that far.
No.
No. Pause. Because literally in the article they mentioned that he was a musician.
I mean.
Oh really? Yeah, that was his protection.
Oh my God.
That would give him a lot of credibility.
Yep.
Yes and no.
Yeah.
So there is an article here I found on Fox News about Tim
Allen?
No, unfortunately.
Speaking
Tim
of
O'Boyle,
cocaine.
Being shot during a raid. This article's from 2008.
Okay.
Wow.
So he was still a police officer. He was a deputy at that time.
Where was this at?
K-Pac.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah, that tracks.
I also have a story here.
Oh, yeah?
Yep, from the Chicago Tribune. This is regarding Kirk Gibson's contract.
Good. I was going to say it better be Skarlarski related.
It's not.
Well, technically.
It's pretty cool, though.
On a technical note.
Yeah. The changes in Gibson's life also have caused the Tigers to make a sacrifice. Gibson's new 3-year, $4.1 million contract has an unusual waiver. It allows him to be an airline pilot.
What?
Gibson has had the urge to fly as long as he can remember. His uncle was a pilot in the Air Force. Gibson wanted to be a commercial pilot before he learned he could earn a lot more money hitting baseballs into outer space. I always wanted to be a pilot, but I was never in the position to do it. There was a time factor, financial restrictions, and there were contract restrictions. It also says that the Tigers had to take out an insurance policy on Gibson because of the stipulation to his contract.
Did drugs autocorrect a pilot when you were Googling?
I honestly just looked up Kirk Gibson contract stipulation, and that's what came up.
Amazing. So. Honestly, they were like, okay, we'll take out the drug testing clause, but we have to have something in there.
Right.
Yeah, the pilot was a cover for the insurance.
Yeah.
In case he ODs.
Yeah. It's a good cover up.
Oh my gosh.
So there we go.
Wow.
It all comes full circle.
Yep.
Thank you, Mike.
No problem.
And on that note, I'm Erica.
I'm Nick.
And I'm Mike.
And this was Thumbing Through the Archives. We'll see you next week. Bye.
This has been another edition of Thumbing Through the Archives on WMIC 660 AM and 95.3 FM. Catch this episode in podcast form every Thursday after the program on our website at SaniLacBroadcasting.com. Thumbing Through the Archives, produced by Mike Gallagher, Nick Lean, and Erica Frisbee, with assistance from Catherine Connolly.